Welcome to the Unsprawling podcast, a show for conversations with the folks working hard to improve Calgary's urban fabric. I'm your host, Hazen Elwood, or you can call me Biz, and we're recording in person at the CJSW station offices on the University of Calgary, here with Adam Kamis, a Calgary music and broadcasting chyron, a model plane enthusiast, and station director here at CJSW. Of course, we are steps away from both Nose Hill and the confluence of the Bow and Elbow rivers. We are podcasting and broadcasting across Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6, as well as on the ancestral territories of the Treaty 7 signatories, including the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bearspaw First Nations of the Îethka Nakota First Nations. It's imperative when we talk about community building and community development, we remember these sacred places, Otsapitamoa and Mohkinstsis, where Indigenous peoples forged stories and perspectives of community alongside the land for generations, where these people and their geographies continue to influence our city today. Adam, thank you so much for joining me and welcoming the podcast into this space.
Delighted to be here, Biz. Thanks for having me.
For the uninitiated, or the curious frequent flyer, could you describe what CJSW is and moreover, what it means to you?
Ooh, okay. Short story long. It is social enterprise that happens to do radio as its outreach sort of thing. But CJSW is Calgary's campus and community broadcaster. We've been broadcasting on the FM frequency for almost 40 years, online in a meaningful sense for, well over a decade now. And with our own app and stuff like that as of a couple of years ago. We are a volunteer-powered society. We're a nonprofit society here in the province of Alberta. We have 8 staff, anywhere from 200 to 300 volunteers of different levels of engagement. That includes on-air weekly programmers or podcast hosts, in addition to folks that kind of just come in and help out or help out once a year or the people you call in for a weird question and they just need a certain person to kind of clarify things. But we are a very unique entity in the sense that we are campus community radio, not a lot of stations like us in Canada. And we are fortunate to be one of the biggest and dare I say best by most measurable metrics of our campus community broadcasters in this country in terms of not only the listener support, but what we try and do and the breadth of programming that we do have. We have programming in 9 different languages. We have programmers that are as young as 18 and as old as, I want to say, 80. And folks that were born in this country, folks that were have lived in this country for less than a year. We have people that have been at it for decades on as a volunteer programmer, and people that have been doing for just a few weeks, all in one little hive of activity that is a really unique place. And it is a resource that beyond what our function is essentially we are a community mirror, a community voice. We are one of the few platforms that still exist where people that have no training and aren't there to necessarily sell you on an idea or a product. They're there just to kind of share something. And we do that in so many different ways through our programming, whether it's like having live bands come in for live performances or special guests coming in talking about events happening in the community. We create a platform that doesn't exist anywhere else. And the value of it is something I can't understate enough or overstate enough, I should say. It's an astounding resource that we have. And it's one of those things that I always notice in a town that doesn't have a campus community station or one that isn't maybe as engaged as this station is with our community, what a difference it is. And where there is a bit of a desert in terms of like arts, culture, news, just even connection. And the fact we have this here is an incredible resource. So delighted to be working here as station manager and with an incredible team trying to continue that for who knows how long we get to.
Absolutely. And it's a bit Freudian, the saying that you understate. That's one of the reasons I really love doing this podcast is that a lot of people, they don't really ever get to put the reasons that drive them and kind of what keeps them going every day out on the air a lot of the time. And it's great to make space for really talking about what makes CJSW and other institutions in our city such great agents of change. And one thing I think that's important, you said multiple times, is community radio. It's not just a student endeavor or something that only students at the University of Calgary can do, but a lot of the times people will graduate and they'll still come back here, or they've never been to the University of Calgary, and this is still kind of their hub or their home for radio. And what do you think is special about CJSW that it draws that kind of continued engagement out of people who maybe don't have any other reason to be on campus?
Ooh, interesting question. So you did touch on an interesting point that a lot of our student programmers that start out as on the campus radio side of things kind of end up graduating into the community side. I'm case in point. I was started as an MRU student, transferred to USC, did radio then. And then by the time I graduated, I was like, oh, I guess I wouldn't run for a student board position. I would run for a community board position. And that's kind of a cool evergreen aspect of it. But it also it kind of prompts us to turn the mulch in terms of getting new students in. But I guess the kind of evergreen aspect of what people maybe find attractive or why, frankly, if I may read between the lines of question, I don't want to overstep any things that you're not saying, but is it like, how are we still relevant is maybe kind of the question I'm hearing?
Maybe that's actually, I never really thought of it that way, but I guess that is a bit of a, because I've been kicking it at CJSW, and so that's not particularly a question that's on my mind. But it is interesting that a radio station, Video Killed the Radio Star was a hit like how many decades ago? And
4.
Yeah, 4 decades ago, and we still have one of the healthiest radio stations in the city, maybe the country, that's operating here.
In a weird way, I would say it kind of has to sometimes do with our geographical isolation. The fact that we're the only independent community campus community broadcaster in town. Like other major Canadian centers have multiple ones. I think the GTA has 6 or 7. Vancouver has 3. And Montreal has 3 as well. We're the only game in town for that. So we've been able to really, I think, over the years, and I'm speaking as someone who's been a listener for since I was a teenager, for 30 years now. And, seeing and actually even understanding the evolution, even back in the 90s when I was first got introduced to CJSW, I think it was I equated it as oh, well, I want to listen to the station because I'm always going to hear something weird or hear someone who sounds kind of like me, or, and it was kind of cool and novelty and all that kind of stuff. But I also appreciate the fact there was other independent media outlets in town that I can engage with to kind of get other perspectives, whether it was Fast Forward magazine or Vox or The Straight or whatever. There was all these kind of neat little micro media sort of things that existed, or locally focused media. And even the ownership structure of local radio and television stations in town at that time was so much different. I remember the A Channel, which was a independent startup in town. That was kind of a cool addition to our broadcast field there. But over the last 25, 30 years, so much of that's been consolidated or shuttered to the extent where, CJSW is arguably, in my opinion, the last truly, I don't want to say we're the only ones, but I would say we're the most dedicated and most consistent source for hearing any sort of news outside of what you would find on CTV nightly news, which is even something in decline, cable TV subscriptions, which is a separate conversation altogether. But it shows that, I guess as the digital age has kind of come forth and we've got these fancy little handheld computers that kind of give an impression that you were engaged with your community because you have, your Instagram friends or Facebook friends or whatever. But it doesn't do the same thing that we do, where you can tune into CJSW and hear something you'll never hear before from someone you've never met before that changes your life, because it's oh, I never knew that band was from Calgary. I'm going to go check out their next show. Or, oh, wow, they're doing a live broadcast at this cool cafe that I've always driven by but never gone into.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like something I want to do. Or, wow, that person has has a unique speech pattern, and I have a unique speech pattern, and I feel like I could actually be a broadcaster versus like thinking that you couldn't do it because you're not like, hey, it's, top of the hour, kind of like FM radio cheesiness and insincerity and or lack of personality, because it's all consolidated into so few voices and so few types of voices, and like hearing that there's relatability and with who's on the other side, because they're not necessarily a pro, but they care and they have a lot of passion, that sort of thing. I would like to think is kind of the real. There's a lot of things about sending, like, I'd like to think a fairly positive culture around here where we we'll try to be welcoming and get people excited about doing things, but it has to be underpinned by, I think, a sense that it's beyond the people that just volunteer within these walls. Like we're trying to get people through our broadcast interested in civic engagement and public engagement, not dissimilar to what it sounds like you're trying to do, or you're doing, forgive me, with that sounded like a jerk thing, but what you're doing with your initiative, here. So it's one of those things that I think that has always resonated, and especially considering maybe not only the geographical isolation, but maybe political isolation too, that, it's, I don't want to say us versus them sometimes, but sometimes it feels like that way of like, yeah, there's like that progressive, cool place where there's things being adopted and, considerations being had for, the world that we, may want to see, or like, oh, everyone gets a fair shake or has an opportunity to be successful, or, can do all the things we want in life. And, and then there's other, I think there's, another sense in this province where it's like, oh, I feel like a lot of people don't want to see things be successful, or they would just want to like maybe save money or, lower my taxes because I don't want to pay for that. Or I want to have something that, fundamentally doesn't, benefit me, but it makes our city look good. I'm referring to arenas there, right there, but that's a separate topic altogether. But, like that kind of thing where there is that unique thing where there's a historic right-wing political stance here. And I that's fine. That's cool. But it's nice to have a contrasting voice, especially when you think of like our sitting premier right now and a former premier were radio hosts in town. They got to espouse their views on a mainstream commercial network talking about what they do. We're the grimy little punks that like to maybe offer a counterpoint to what else is being out there. And I think that counterpoint, that other knowledge that there's another path to things is incalculably important.
Absolutely. I think, it's almost said a little bit too often is, 50% of success is just showing up. And I think I say this a lot in activism and advocacy, is you don't even need to articulate your point like an academic. Like you don't need to get it perfect, but as long as you're there and you're in person and you're showing people that you have a face and you have feelings and you care about these things and you have really good reasons to care about these things, I think that totally blows people's conceptions out of the water a lot of the time if they're kind of used to their monotonous life that they experience in a place like Calgary. I think you touched on a lot of different things there that resonate a lot with me. I think CJSW definitely feels like a hub or a bit of an incubator for like an alternative perspective for Calgary. I know the founder of More Neighbors Calgary. I know that you know her from kind of a job that you worked together about a decade ago, I think. And my MLA actually was a bit of a CJSW nerd when she was in high school, and so it's always fun to bring her around the station, and she's kind of nerding out about the old funding drive merch and things like that. And do you think that, talk a little bit about the political element there, like what like expand a bit on the civic engagement side?
Ooh, okay. So that's good. So like, I want to be clear, is there is like the closest thing to a political statement the CJSW has is our mission, vision, and values. And essentially it's saying like, we want to distill it. We want to create a place where anyone can contribute to the organization and anyone can engage with it who listens to it. Like that's a very broad stroke sort of thing. So what does that mean? Well, we want to kind of impart people the technical techniques and skills and like how to best present a viewpoint or whatever like that, and let people kind of run with it. I suspect we are on a university campus, so we often would skew left, I would say, which I think also complements a lot of our community programming, because it's not necessarily mainstream. It's sometimes more challenging, and sometimes that can cross over into like political views. Now, there is no formal like you can't say this or can't say that about stuff that we have. Everything has to be taken as a case by case sort of thing, but fundamentally our objective is, as an organization, is to kind of create a platform where people can discuss things in open ways or share concepts and ideas, and that sometimes can be challenging. We've gotten complaints over the years about certain things being said, and there's been very few like kind of overly egregious things that were just like, oh well, yeah, that just has no place on our broadcast, and those get dealt with. But that's kind of the challenge of kind of giving people such independence and direction, is like, well, they will stir the shit pot, if I may. Sometimes a feather will get ruffled, but that's often good, because for any one of us, to whatever our belief system is, like, we fundamentally should welcome critiques and criticisms from contrasting viewpoints, because that just hones down our arguments all the better. The idea that like the response to criticism or critiques a viewpoint is to shut it down is like, I don't know if that helps anyone like at all. But being confronted with a contrasting point where you actually say like, you do make a point, but I still have a thing, like it really hones down your arguments there. And that's fundamentally what we want to do. And there, like, it comes off as maybe leftist too in this environment too. I think of some of our long form news programs, like something like Sprawlcast, not to put Jeremy on the hot seat here, but he'll do these very awesome investigative deep dive news pieces on local issues that don't get any level of depth of coverage compared to what he does. And sometimes it will seem like, oh, he's hypercritical of our current provincial government or things, but it's always couched in like observable fact or like stuff there. And like, if you're a supporter of their current government, that's kind of cool. Like, you can check it out or you can turn it off. But if you want an echo chamber for your own beliefs, it's like not something we're trying to create here. We're trying to create an open space for it. It's a tricky thing to do, and like I would be lying to say it's not a very tricky thing to do in the year 2024, and has been hard for the last decade. I think the digital culture in its intersection with what our traditional broadcast media thing is, I think created some opportunities for us to think about like how we do things sometimes, or acknowledging that, oh, maybe audiences like people change or have a different point of view, or to have a different value set on certain things that may have been okay in previous years. Like, you did a land acknowledgement at the top of this show, and that was something we introduced to our broadcast, I think back 2016 or so. And we were the first in town to do it, and we got so many people and say, why I don't understand this, why? But now it's so ubiquitous and common. It's is that trying to social condition people? No, I think it's more, it came from a place of like, no, we just want to be acknowledge that we live and get to work in this incredible place that belong to other people, lock, stock, and barrel, and now we have to share our future together. And part of that is maybe showing a little bit of gratitude and also paying it forward a little bit. And it's like, well, when new people come over here, like maybe we welcome them and maybe tell them the story of Indigenous life, or like Indigenous culture. And, kind of like that's part of the obligation of being a person in Alberta now. And that was something I think was conceptually weird, but it was like something that was just frankly emblematic of the tip of the spear mentality that this place has had. I think we had the first female broadcaster in Calgary. We had the first openly gay broadcaster in Calgary, first Black broadcaster in Calgary, like I think even first Indigenous broadcaster in Calgary. And that actually, I think that's a badge of honor. It's like, well, it's showing the amazing breadth of our society here. We have so many people from so many different places, and some people, are folks that whose families have lived here for thousands of generations, like the indigenous folks, or some folks, like I said earlier, just moved here earlier this year. And like the fact that we all get to live in this crazy place is wonderful. And having a place where CJSW can be like that meeting point and nexus of ideas, opinions, perspectives, and is really, really good. And that's always a telltale sign of like fundamentally a good and stable society and democracy, is the fact that there are places where people can celebrate their commonalities and or share ideas, and without fear of repercussion, which I think social media does a very bad job of it. But sadly, it is a way people often do engage with their communities, and thinking it's the same as actually having a conversation like we're having today. It's not the same. There's a lot of nuance, and a lot of sensitivity. And I think that's something we try to empower all our programmers and contributors to do on a day in, day out basis. Doesn't matter what type of show you do. Like whoever your community is, like make that connection with them, or and learn about them, and share their stories and stuff like that. And it's transcendental against any program we have. Whether you've been doing a hip hop show for 25 years, you have an audience. Or if you do the Croatian show on Sunday mornings, you have an audience that you can work with, and kind of get maybe people understanding more about any one of those topics or phenomena.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I really like to give a land acknowledgement is to tell that the story as old as time, that the Indigenous people knew about this geography, and that we experience today on this same geography, is that idea of the confluence. And this is something that's very, I would say, unique to Calgary. Like you had said, there's pretty much every other campus and community radio station has to deal with so much more competition, and we look at our city is one of the only cities in North America of this size that continues to be mononuclear, and that it hasn't quite created multiple different places that work as plexuses. And part of that is choices that have been made by municipal governments past, but I think a lot of that is kind of a unique feature of Calgary, that despite being kind of a small town that's turning into a big town, we still have a bit of a focus point, and these agents of those focus points that allow people to come together. And there is a bit of a protest element to creating spaces for a diversity of voices. Like you had said, it is a very tricky thing to do, is to not kind of let one perspective dominate all the others, and really try to maintain the ability to lift people up and bring them to the place where they can contribute, and maybe not go through however many years of broadcasting school to be able to do it like a pro, but kind of be able to bumble yourself to a place that feels like it's it's good and people appreciate it, and they can see themselves in it. And I think that was a really touching thing that you said there. And I think it's very similar to what Unsprawling, the organization, wants to do to make Calgary better, is really help people who have these messages to share figure out a way to bring that message to a wider audience, if it's, because that's not something that people necessarily are thinking about when they're doing this difficult work on the ground. They might not be really worrying about how to communicate it or how to get it to a wider audience. And so I want to dig in a little bit more on that element of CJSW, is kind of the volunteerism and trying to really lift up people's voices in this kind of advancing technological world. We have opportunities where people can hear lots and lots of different perspectives all the time, but it feels like almost a little bit overwhelming. And I think CJSW has a good balance of kind of bringing people up, but then also has that curated piece where there are some standards. How do you kind of set that balance editorially?
Ooh, fantastic question. So that's go back to the fact that we have 8 staff here. That's what a large part of what our staff works on, is to kind of do the training and skill building and team building, to make confident, informed, proficient programmers. And, you know, it is a balance. So like, I'll pick on one of I think the most nebulous things with CJSW is, what what are we allowed to play? Well, big question. So we have our programmers self-directed. They do not have to play certain things at the top hour, but there are some rules that we need to adhere to as part of our holding a broadcast license in this country, like CanCon rules. We do 35% CanCon, but we also have a self-imposed rule where we want at least 10% of our broadcast to feature local talent. We also have a self-imposed rule of like playing chart list music, and chart list is where we dump quality new music that has yet to find an audience. And that's one of the beautiful things about the station, is it's being a vehicle for discovery. And every week we get probably 500 or 600 things that we whittle down to maybe 40 or 50 things to put on our charts. Those are added and updated all the time, but incorporating that in there ensures that we do have new music always coming into our broadcast. So those are like the two big ones. And then, it gets honed finer down, whether you want to be like a podcaster and working with our podcast coordinator, Kamal, or a programmer of a music show who would be working with Emily to come up with a pitch. Is like, what we try to do is like really make it intentional in its execution or presentation, I should say. And not just like we're going to have the mic on and ramble on for an hour and a half and call that a podcast. It's like, no, let's like use some of the technology to make good audio fades and good audio cuts. Let's use our license-free music library to add a cool backing track onto it, so it really sounds immersive and doesn't sound like just like some guy in front of a microphone just talking about stuff. For music shows, it's like, well, what's the direction of the show? It's like, we get programmers who are like, yeah, I would love to like play, like do like an all Drake show. It's like, well, no, that doesn't work. Drake already has like a million other outlets where they can get that happening for him. But like, why wouldn't you want to say like, well, why don't you dig a little deeper, maybe discover some local stuff, maybe discover some general Canadian stuff outside of Drake, or maybe you want to look at maybe artists that influence it. There's other ways to kind of scratch your maybe itch, but what we're trying to do is show people what they don't know already. And that is kind of I think a really interesting programming thing, because like most other programming is that you will hear on other media sources, and I will say media sources is there to sell advertising, and we're here to, our advertisers reach out to us because we're unique, and people that do want to try something new or hear something different or be challenged will come listen to us. They may not like what they hear all the time or agree with what they hear or think the music is terrible or whatever, and that's fine. But they come because it's the challenge, and that's something that most other media I think has failed at miserably. And this is, well before even the internet age, is like, I think media lost sight of the fact that their listeners are smarter and more, or their audiences are smarter, more engaged and interested than they were given credit for. And I don't know if it was a deliberate idea to either dumb down audiences because it's easier for a big media conglomerate to hire one program director to manage several markets versus a program director in each market, to have that nuanced sensitivity. But it's the net result is like, I would say the cultural literacy of the average person is far less than what it used to be. And that's weird because we have essentially access to the entire world of culture at our fingertips at all times. But like, it's how we engage with it and how we don't really get exposed to that which we do not know so much of the digital experience and when experiencing culture is, well, it's like the cookie system. You went to one site, then you'll get ads that'll recommend to go to other sites. It's very much kind of, not to sound cliche, but like an algorithm that will kind of guide you along your way. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think that's actually kind of cool in some ways, but as a holistic experience as a human, it's like, I understand that maybe the digital world, this is me personally speaking, is like my engagement digital culture will kind of like scratch the itches I already have. Whereas like listen to something like CJSW will expand what I know. And I find, I always want every day to be a school day. And every time I listen to CJSW, I learn something new or like hear something I never knew existed before. And that is endlessly exciting. Life's so short. No one of us is going to experience it all, but at least knowing about as much as you can, that should be, I would think, a goal for anyone, really.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my goals. I mean, like as a lifelong learner, but also bring people the opportunities to engage in that with urban geography or urban planning and things like that. Is, I care a lot about zoning and even like zoning economics and things like that. But I would rather give the microphone over to somebody who knows more about transit or knows more about the climate and things like that when it comes to those issues, because those are equally important. And I think people, they definitely do appreciate when something comes up on their algorithm that's kind of maybe recommended to them, but then it's not just slop, is it's this curated, these people who know a little bit more than the average Joe about something, who have been curated into a place where they're able to express the knowledge that they have, to really give people the opportunity to become more well-rounded people and more engaged in that way and become more literate in their world. And I think
and coming in with no experience necessary too, where you can kind of really wander in from campus here and find yourself in a position where it's like, wow, you are now have an audience of thousands of people that you can engage with. It's incredible.
And that segues to the point I was about to go to, which is nice, is I always come to you to talk about kind of volunteer strategy, because I think that's one of the real strength points of CJSW. Like every nonprofit that I've like worked with so far, we're just like, we need to look at what CJSW does and try to kind of like take that magic to like bring into our own system. Is there's almost a bit of a ladder that you climb as a volunteer here, where you kind of get a lot of easy but engaging things to do at first, and then when you are kind of ready for that, you move on to the next level. And then I like the word, maybe not transparent but permeable, where it's not necessarily like everything is available to you right away, but if you present yourself as the kind of person who wants access, then sure, come on in. So talk a little bit more about maybe your experience, what it means to be a station director, and kind of how that system has developed over time, where you can really bring people up to the level that they deserve to be at.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess so. I've been station manager here for 8 years now, but I was a volunteer before then. So I think, and this is, a very interesting job with a lot of different aspects to it. But I guess that, I, along with every other staff member here, are custodians of a place that's existed in one form or another since the 50s. More formally, certainly in the last 45, 50 years. But essentially, we are the heirs to systems and processes that have existed prior to our time. But we've all added our own little integration to the whole to kind of improve or change or otherwise kind of further the interests of the station going forward. So I think maybe that's a good point to start from, is the fact that we are custodians here. Like, I treat this job as a responsibility to bear rather than a title to hold, if that makes any sense. Because of the fundamental value I see as an individual to what this station's mission is for our community. It's like, like it's incredibly important. It's not like any other job where it's like, oh, I just have a cool title and I get to, sit in a certain type of chair.
Yeah, you see a lot of managers that actually don't have any managing skills. It's hilarious.
Okay.
Other than maybe micromanaging.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. And I think that's probably micromanaging is it's something that can happen from, certainly myself to staff, or like the station manager, I should say, to staff, and then staff to volunteers. But I think it's more important to get a culture where people are encouraged to figure out what they want to do and like how to do it, and then do it, and then tell us how cool it was, or where you got stuck and you need some help. Like that's more effective and that's more true to the voice. And I guess, in terms of, I can't speak for other nonprofits and stuff like that, because like nonprofits generally as a rule are passion projects that have been formalized into going concerns. They can be businesses, they can be just little groups of people that have a dream and want to see something happen in their world, which is awesome. But the fact that I think everyone here is cognizant that what we do is, and this not, hopefully not attaching undue self-importance, but it is something that is so important to our city's well-being. Like the waterworks people have to make sure none of us get giardia or yellow fever or anything. Our mission and job is to ensure that Calgarians always get a reflection of themselves and the reflection of their views and reflection of their hopes and dreams and stuff like that. So I guess starting with that, and this goes back to maybe something I said at the very top of our interview today, is like, we are a social enterprise that does radio as a side. And like, for my part, I've always wanted to impart an idea that we are here because a lot of people are coming here for a lot of different reasons. Some people want to be on radio. Some people don't have anywhere else to go. Some people just like to use coffee, or like to have a bubbly or a bag of chips, or all these things. People come for different points, but like once they're here, it's like, well, maybe you'll make a friend, or maybe you'll hear about someone who's hiring for a job, or maybe you'll do that. So you create this like cool little
Plaza.
Environment. What's that? Sorry?
It's a plaza.
It's a plaza. Exactly. Where people can meet other kind of like-minded souls and make those connections. And that the power of what a group of people that kind of make connections like that is far more than what one staff member can say is like, this is how it has to be done. It's like, I think it's better when you get people motivated and excited and engaged, and then see what magic they spin and kind of watch and like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, what an amazing thing. And, I've had the good privilege of seeing the growth and progress and development of so many folks. Like, not only is just when it staff over the last 8 years, but, my peer group that I was a cohort of when I joined the station like 26 years ago, seeing like how they've been successful in life, or their triumphs and failures and challenges. And, when we have those, unhappier times where, like we buried a very beloved station member this year. We had to, bury other members over times, and like, having that sense of community when those bad times happen is also important. And I think it's like an assurance thing for anyone who does get involved, knowing that, oh, I too will be cared for. It's not just like, a transactional interaction with us. It's like, you're part of this little family and crew. Come out to the Christmas party or holiday party, whatever, and like sing some karaoke really badly and eat some pizza, and it'll be fun. But also 2 months later, come mourn the passing of one of our friends, to have that kind of environment where people sometimes you only see once a week or once a year, that you can kind of come together and kind of just immediately pick up from where you left off, because there's this commonality. But like, like we are both here to improve our community in the way we see our talents best being applied to do it. And that's something that I think is a good sinew for any sort of organization to have. And that's something that I always admired. And that's something, it was my favorite parts of the culture when I first got here. I got to confess, when I first started here, the station manager who was at the time was not very nice to me, but it didn't matter because the music director was, and pulled me aside and actually gave me a little time and actually showed me a little understanding that, oh, you're a weirdo, but you seem like you have something on the go. So let's talk about music for 5 minutes. Like those little things make so much of a difference. And it's like, so, and I don't want to be a pessimist. I like, or speak beyond my own personal experience, but I guess since a lot of folks, and this is cross-generational, don't have those points where they get to connect with someone and like just talk about something informally or off the cuff or just speculate like people often have done in the past, where it's just like, hey, what do you think about this? Having a debate with another volunteer on what's better, Smarties or playing M&Ms, like that kind of stuff. Like this is the, definitely not necessarily the problems of the world that we need to get to first. Like, let's figure out environmental catastrophe solutions and cure cancer first. But, like the fact that we have these baby steps, and it shows that there's humanity to us all, and we are all contributors here. Some of us have different ranks than others, but we all are here for the exact same reasons. Is like, we want to make our community better. We want to share something cool and fun. And that is something that is completely sacred. And I guess that's something that I think all of our staff try to do in their own ways and through their own jobs. Like it's, there's no one staff member who doesn't work with a volunteer. Like all of us do. And all of us have different interactions with our community and other staff and alumni and our community at large. Like, but we try to communicate that, like, hey, this is something important and something you could be a part of too, and something that you may not understand right now, but trust me, it will add value to your life.
Absolutely. I think it's, I like the word generosity a lot, is really creating the space for other people to come forward and giving them those branches that they can catch on to and come and be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And I think music is such a great vehicle for that, as something that everybody understands and everybody can be a part of. And obviously music and journalism and all the other wonderful things that are broadcast out of CJSW are really vehicles for cultural change. And I think we've seen Calgary definitely morph and change as a city in just the last 10 years. It's been incredibly surprising since even when I first started being somebody who was old enough to even know what politics was. And there's been a lot of change. And I think people see the value in that and the institutions that help create the spaces for that. And whether it's people's excess time or people's excess money, I think people really like to give back to those organizations. And I wanted to touch on the funding drive, because we know that's upcoming. Mm-hmm. If you're listening to the podcast when it's out, it probably is already happening. And I wanted to ask, do you know a lot about the development of the theme this year, the Radiotown?
Oh yes, Sounds of Radiotown. So we, our team of staff, so let's set the stage. So we do our funding drive the last full week of every October. That has been the case for the last 30 years. Station management back in the early 90s kind of initiated that plan, and now we're the biggest, baddest, most successful funding drive of our kind in Canada. But the planning for it starts in January, February, where we try to conceptualize things. And sometimes there are different zeitgeists or themes or aesthetics that kind of capture the imagination. And this year, the Sounds of Radiotown is our theme. And it really was informed by so much of like how much we love the city we're in. Like, is it perfect? No, but it's our city and we want to make it better. And it's, there's so many things about our city that are placemaking and like are the reasons why people want to live here. Like, I know Calgary has 2 or 3 Costco's, but who cares? That's not a placemaker in the same way that having a place like the Globe Cinema downtown is a placemaker, or having Tubby's or any of the great, unique, iconic, small organizations or businesses in town that really are the soul of the city. Like, and that's something we try to reflect with our commercial partnerships. We do our Friends Card, which is an amazing program that's existed for decades now, that we work with our local commercial community, our local small businesses, organizations, and we they offer our donors a discount that they'll honor, and we offer those businesses promotion and advertising for it. So it works out really, really well, and it keeps us. It prompts us really to have to work with the community. There's a lot of stations like us that don't do any really community outreach, and it's like you can't do radio in a vacuum because that's called Spotify with a talkover. Frankly, you have to have,
and they got the DJ now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the whole thing is like sincere, honest, genuine community connection is why people want to tune into the show or tune into the program. Like, it's amazing. We're doing this show right now, this interview right now, while Helen's doing the future language program. And it's a show that people absolutely adore because Helen is such a lunatic, and like, she's so funny and so warm and kind, and like does so much for the scene beyond just being our music director and a great programmer. It's like something that people want to hear what Helen has to say about what the best new punk records are coming out. Cause like, really, there's few people in town that know as much as Helen does on that. And that's a real relationship. And, you know, like, and it reflects in our community connection. Like, you know, her show is sponsored by the Palomino, which is, you know, one of Calgary's most iconic independent venues, and has been for 2 decades now, and has been the, stomping grounds for many a great event and show, and all the things that really add the spice of life to being a citizen here in Calgary. It's like, it's that kind of stuff that we try to promote and like let people know, yes, but there is a cool punk show tonight. You've never been to a punk show before? Don't worry, just go, like, have some fun. Like, Helen's hopefully giving you an idea of what the bands sound like. You can go to this place that she told you has great barbecue, so you can grab a nice bite to eat beforehand, and then you can have a fun night out, which, you know, doesn't involve you know, like doing something that like is, I don't want to say normie, but just like kind of
driving
like
my Ford F-150 out to the boonies. And
well, there's a time, place, there. Whatever gets you through the night's fine, but it just shows you like engaging with the stuff that really is the spice of life, like music, food, culture, that excitement, the joy of being alive. Like, no one's on their deathbed thinking about how much TV they watched. You know, they think about like that time you went to this crazy concert, or, you know, other kind of life-changing experiences. And that's the stuff that, you know, you experience that on the weekend, you put in your back pocket when you go back to work or school or whatever in the week, and it inspires you to try something new or do something else, or read a new book, or who knows what it can do. But I've seen it happen 8 trillion times of people kind of hearing something on our station, or you know, using a discount on a friend's card or religiously because it's, or creating a relationship with themselves with a business on our friend's card because, oh, I never knew this place was around the corner from my house, or like they make the best shawarma or whatever. Like, it's like that kind of epiphany stuff is like just adds so much value to being alive. Like, you don't have to just like, you know, order McFood and you know, just like live McLife. There's dimensions and so many different pathways, and the best part about Calgary too is the fact that it's such a verdant environment to create something new yourself. And it's, you know, I think of our Friends Card partners now that were maybe clients or former employees of Friends Card businesses from years ago, but were inspired by, you know, the fact that Calgary's a cool place. I can be a cool small business owner in town, or I can open up a weirdo skate shop or something like that in the middle of perceived redneck Alberta. Like, that's a cool thing, and something that I think we try to do in our funding drive. And then, you know, it's something we try to do day in, day out too. So Darren Powell's in the next room. He's a programmer that I really appreciated. He was one of those people that was like that kind of generous.
Oh,
and,
wow. One of
kind
the
of thoughtful.
OGs.
One of the OGs. Like, yeah, he's a person I met at CJSW that I have all the respect for in the world, and someone that you know, the kind of you know, environment he tried to create for me when I was a new volunteer is something that I am inspired by, because Darren is like one of the best lead from behind people you'll ever come across.
Yeah. One thing that you started to touch on there is that I feel like there's a sharp divide with Calgarians where there's people who get Calgary and people who don't. There's people who really love Calgary and people who really hate it. People who are kind of connected into the community and people who are kind of like have this anomic, like they just see it as this liminal space that they're forced to be in, and they're not like really engaged in the ways that they wish they could be. And I guess as a closing point, what's your what's your advice to somebody who's like that has like a really positive, like they want Calgary to improve, but they just don't have the connections or the know-how to really get involved and do what they see themselves doing?
Oh, what an interesting and fascinating question. So I think it might be of value to acknowledge that Calgary is a unique city in the sense that, in my perception, it's very much a port city, not dissimilar to like a Vancouver, because we do attract people from all over the world that come here to find their fortune. But it's unique in the sense that hasn't necessarily been a gradualist process. It's often been punctuated by boom bust cycles. So a lot of people come here because they have to, or they feel that they have to. And it's like, oh God, I have to go to Calgary. I'm from a cool world-class city. Now I have to go to the sticks of Western Canada. That's bad. But some people turn around and absolutely love it. I guess, and I would be curious to know if there's a similar feelings in other cities where there's like a love-hate. I've immediately reminded of the Spike Lee movie, Summer of Sam. And the narrator at the beginning is like, he says, New York, a city I love and hate equally. Yeah. It's like one of those things. I get that why people would have maybe that attitude with Calgary, but I think that kind of, you could almost reduce that down to what's a person's individual perspective, a glass half full, glass half empty. And like, I guess, and you kind of touched on that point, this like, what would you prescribe to people that have that desire, have maybe, at least in their spirit and soul, kind of maybe committed to doing the work it takes to make something fun for themselves? That's an easy one to address, but like for everyone else who's just like, well, the world's not making anything happen for me. It's like, well, nothing will ever happen if you have that too. I'm sorry. That's just kind of how the world works. Doesn't matter where you're living. But the cool thing to those maybe people that are like on the cusp of getting engaged or like hungry to find something outside what they've maybe grown up with or been conditioned to like or whatever. We lost a
It's okay.
Camera too. That's all right. What we can maybe what I would prescribe to them is get engaged. And there are so many different intersection points. Like CJSW was the right point for me because I appreciated the fact that it connected so many different things together. But they're like Unsprawling. This is a fantastic initiative where like it's the barrier to entry and getting involved is very low and commitment levels low, and that might be good for you. But if it isn't good for you, there's other things there that, or if they don't exist, there's capacity and bandwidth in this town to create things that have never existed before to kind of do it. But it all boils down to like, you got to do a little bit of work yourself, whatever that looks like. Is that if that means knocking on your neighbor's door to ask them like, hey, what do you think about this new zoning proposal here? Or like, that can be one of it. Or it could be like, joining a group like Unsprawling or volunteering an organization like CJSW to kind of see something outside yourself. And this is something for anyone who's looking for jobs out there. And I can only speak as someone who looks at a lot of resumes coming here and has looked in mostly the bar industry and stuff like that. Is like, I rarely look at resumes that don't have any sort of volunteering. And why that is because get involved as a volunteer proves to the world and to yourself that you can see outside your own vision and you can see something bigger than what you can hold in your hands. And that is something that you can't put a value on in terms of an individual experience. And that would be my challenge to anyone who's never thought of volunteering is like, try it. If you are bummed that you don't, maybe have friends or you don't feel like you're connected to your community, mix it up with your community. There are like Calgary has long been known as a volunteer city. I've been a volunteer here all my adult life until being snapped, but I'm still a volunteer outside CJSW. Like, it's such a huge, fulfilling part of the human experience to give back to your community, whatever that looks like. But that's kind of I think maybe some of the anger a lot of others feel maybe in macro problems with the world, like wealth disparity, is like there's a feeling that maybe the hyper wealthy don't give back enough to their communities. They are exploiters and or use their power and influence in ways to subjugate people. Like, and I think that's fundamentally a concern people have on a global level. And it's, I think, manifests itself in a lot over the last few years, and will only do it more, is that idea that, well, there's people that don't do anything for their communities. They are dragons who are hoarding wealth, whereas, like, if you hoard your time and don't really give anything out, you don't really get anything from your community. But like getting involved, getting plugged in, whatever, like I said, whatever that looks like, that could be the most meager thing. If it's like walking your neighbor's dog because they're too old or whatever to do it, that's no less noble than, starting up a nonprofit to create discussions like this to happen and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll kind of probably just leave it there. It's just get involved, people. Like, get involved, kick yourself in the ass a little bit, and then find that place that resonates with you, because there's certainly something for everyone out there.
Yeah. Drink like 3 cups of coffee and then let the coffee tell you where you're supposed to go.
Hey, whatever works, like if you want to do the old, reading runes or tea leaves, I'm down for that as well.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons I created Unsprawling is to create a space for opportunity for different people. I noticed the nonprofit space was starting to get into the not another podcast or not another server, because these platforms really kind of divide our attention and make us kind of pick and choose where we want to go. And so I really wanted to make something that feels a little bit more lively and together as a community. And definitely looking at CJSW as a model of that, as a place that has been so successful at creating change in a place like Calgary. And so we hope you enjoyed the podcast talking with Adam here, and we hope maybe we'll see you on the podcast next time, either as a listener or if you're so inclined, maybe you'll be on the other side of the camera next time. So hope to see you then. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks for having me, Biz. How do people reach out to your podcast?
Hop on the Discord server, hop on the forum, be part of the conversation. How do people donate to the funding drive?
Excellent question. CJSW.com/donate is open 24/7 for your donation needs. Conversely, during October 18th through 25th, 2024, the number to call is 403-220-5000, and we're happy to have it. Or swing by room 312, McEwen Hall, Monday through Saturday, 10 to 5, all the time.
That's right. CJSW and Unsprawling forever.
Yeah.